All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us for today's webinar. It's in the cloud, Percipio Consulting hosting. We're recording this session and we'll submit a link to the recording over the next few days. Our next webinar is scheduled for May 6th at 11 a.m. Central, running on all cylinders, performance tuning for the Atlassian toolset. As you have questions, please be sure to provide them via the questions utility in the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll queue them up and answer them towards the end of the session. On the webinar today from Percipio Consulting, we have Christopher Pepe. Chris is a partner here at Percipio Consulting and will be delivering today's webinar. My name is Shayla Sander. I'm a business development manager for Percipio Consulting, and I'll be serving as your moderator. We've been Atlassian expert partners for over 6 years now and are one of 5 platinum enterprise experts in the country. Over 99% of our projects are Atlassian related, and we have hundreds of clients across the U.S., ranging in size from 20-person companies to Fortune 20 enterprises spanning many different industries. We help our clients with process-centric technology solutions that facilitate traditional business process management, IT service management based on ITIL, and software development life cycles. In the SDLC space, we're helping clients transition from waterfall to agile, so whatever widgets you produce, we help improve the quality and throughput at the lowest cost. We support our clients in all facets of the Atlassian product suite and build methodologies and solutions across the entire product line. This includes solutions architecting and implementations, licensing, upgrades and maintenance, managed hosting, add-ons, and training. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Chris, and he's going to lead us through today's webinar.
Thank you, Shayla. So what we're going to talk about today is a new product offering that we have called Cumulus. So we're going to start off with the architecture and the background behind why we developed this system in the first place, and then look at some of the supplemental and complementary technologies that are working with it. So first we'll start off by looking at what the security model is and some of the security features that we have built in. Next we'll look at the redundancy that's built into the system for data integrity. And finally we'll talk a little bit about the monitoring that we have in place as well. If you have any questions, please queue them up, and we'll answer them towards the end. So let's start off with the architecture. So as I mentioned, this is a new product offering that we've just come out with. We've actually been hosting for our clients for many years now. And that has served well. We do a lot of managed services work, and hosting is really an extension of that. So if you don't really want to have to deal with having the systems internally, external hosting is a great way to fill that need. We developed this next generation of our hosting because we're really seeing a lot of the same problems over and over again in our clients. One of the biggest problems that we see, especially as adoption rates start to grow throughout an entire enterprise-size organization, we really see performance usually take a hit. So a lot of times when we engage with our clients, they are complaining about poor performance in the applications. It's kind of giving Jira and the other tools a bad name. People don't really like the products, when really what the core root cause of the problem is that the hosting platform isn't really properly set up to be able to manage that application effectively. That was a big driver in the architecting and designing of Cumulus. We wanted to really fine-tune this for high-performance hosting so that our clients can host with us and know that with confidence their application is going to scale and maintain that high performance at scale. We also want to build in a lot of redundancy and a lot of data integrity so that even if you're not using the Atlassian clustering data center offering, that you still have a lot of reliability and a lot of high performance. A really nice bonus that we got out of building this is that another thing that we've noticed with our clients is that when they want to make the jump to data center, the very first thing that they need to do is evaluate data center to make the business case to go get the money for the licenses, because it's considerably more expensive than buying a standalone Atlassian application. But requisitioning hardware is both expensive and time consuming. Getting the IT ops or DevOps team to install the data center product, get everything configured, and get everything working together so that they can actually start their evaluation. It was very time consuming. So for rapid enterprise organizations, they're really looking at like these 6 to 9 weeks at best to be able to roll out a data center proof of concept. And much more common is up in the like 6 to 9 months time frame. You're busy people, got a lot of other projects going on. It just takes a really long time to get these things rolled out. Well, in a matter of days, we can have a data center instance stood up and in your hands to work as an evaluation. And then there's a handful of options from there as well. You can either continue hosting with us, we can help you migrate it into your environment. But the main point is that we can really quickly get this prototyping or evaluation system stood up and in your hands so you can begin your evaluation, as opposed to having to worry about all of the details to do that work internally. So those are really some of the drivers behind why we wanted to design this new system. Without belaboring this diagram too much, there's a number of technologies that are all lumped together to make up this private cloud offering. There's a couple of different ways that you can get into it. Out in front of the whole thing is a firewall and a load balancer. So especially if you're going to be using data center, you really have to have a load balancer to be able to direct users to the different nodes in the cluster. There are still a couple of reasons why we would use the load balancer even for a single instance. One of the things that we also offer is a site-to-site VPN. So if you really want to kind of tighten up the privateness of this private cloud, we can actually make it a lot more tied into your organization's infrastructure, so it's only available to your resources from your environment and really give it that true private cloud feel. There's a number of other things that we can do as well to give a kind of lighter private cloud feeling, locking things down to certain IP ranges that are allowed to connect in from the internet, etc. Once you get into the system, eventually all of the requests are going to be directed to a virtual machine. And then on that virtual machine will either be your application, say Confluence, or a node of a data center cluster. So one of the nodes of your Confluence data center cluster is running on that virtual machine. So your private cloud would be some number of virtual machines that are running the applications, cluster database in the back end, potentially a load balancer in the front end, and then firewall. In addition to that, each of the virtual machines themselves will be hardened. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the security section, though. And then the last piece is storage. So there's a redundant storage mechanism that we have that allows us to expose shared storage to all the different virtual machines. So we're actually using a clustered file system as well to give more redundancy in the data storage layer. So just to kind of recap some of these benefits, I'm just going to pull them all out on the slide so you don't have to listen to me talk about each one. So optimal performance is really the overarching goal. That's why we designed this. Every design decision that we made along the way was really to optimize performance for Atlassian applications. It's really fine-tuned to that. There is already a really great cloud offering that's out there. It's called Atlassian Cloud. So you can go get any of their products. It's really quick, it's really easy, it's really cheap. You just go sign up, you pay the monthly fee, and you get to use the tools. But really the limiting factor there is that as teams scale, they tend to outgrow it pretty quickly. So for up to teams of maybe 100, it's a great offering if you don't really have very complex needs or wants. It's not a very customizable solution. We're kind of the opposite end of that spectrum. We are Atlassian experts. We know the tools inside and out. We also have decades of sysadmin experience. That's allowed us to build a product offering around kind of those two pieces. We'll allow the flexibility to do things like connect into your user directory or offer site-to-site VPNs, things that you can't really get with other hosting organizations. Really our intent and our goal is to be an extension of your IT ops or DevOps team. We really want it to look and feel exactly the same as if you were hosting this application internally, but give you the freedom and flexibility to outsource that to us so you don't have to manage the hardware, you don't have to manage the virtualization layer, you don't need to manage the OS layer or the application layer. We'll handle all of that for you. And we'll also go through a whole design process with you to make sure that we can tailor your solution to really what it is that you're looking for. So as soon as you say the word cloud, security is one of the first things that jumps into people's mind. Well, in my opinion, security should be the first thing that jumps into your mind no matter where you're hosting anything. So we're obviously going to use the best practice of anything that's going over the wire is going to be encrypted with SSL. We're offering point-to-point VPN as an additional way of tying things down. Although if you'd like to, we're perfectly happy to host things out on the public internet. We have a border firewall, which is very common in a corporate environment. So that's not really that big of a deal. But the bigger deal here, I think, is that we treat every single virtual machine, every single component of the system as a fortress. So everything has a firewall on it. Only services that need to be running are running. Only services that need to be exposed are exposed, and they're only exposed to the other servers that they need to talk to. So things are really locked down to prevent the ability to move from system to system in an unauthorized manner. That's really going into kind of hardening the servers and all the best practices that we've picked up over our decades of hosting experience. So in addition to the firewalls and services, only services that should be running, other best practices around access to privileged accounts, access to administration consoles and things like that. All of those are considered in hardening the servers to make them as safe and secure as they possibly can be. And then finally, we're using a single tenant model. So your Cumulus cloud is completely isolated from another customer's Cumulus cloud. There's no raindrops dripping between those two clouds. There's no interconnectivity between them. You're in your own isolated, jailed environment and pretty well locked down into that space. So next up, I wanted to talk about redundancy a little bit. So now we have a high performance, highly tuned application offering for Atlassian tools. We have got rock solid security to make sure that the data itself is protected. But what about in the case of failures? So the picture that's shown here is actually from Atlassian Data Center. This is showing multiple nodes in a cluster. So if you're going to use Data Center as an offering, that is one of the first layers of redundancy that you're going to run into. It's worth noting that the load balancer actually has a lot of redundancy built into it as well. But here we have a number of nodes, so that if a particular node fails for any reason, say a plugin misbehaves, the Java heap wasn't set correctly on one of the nodes, and it runs out of memory. If one of those nodes drops out of the cluster, the rest of the cluster is still up and running, and you have that resilience, that high availability. You've also got performance at scale with Data Center. So by having 3 nodes, you have pretty close to 3 times the throughput that you would have with a single node in a, say, Jira server. Beyond that, the virtualization layer that we're doing has a lot of redundancy built into it. So if there's a hardware failure in the physical hardware underneath that, all of those resources will automatically be transitioned to a working set of hardware while the degraded hardware is repaired. All of that's going to be transparent to the user and happen automatically, so there'll be zero downtime in that. I mentioned that we're using a clustered file system, also clustered databases in the back end. So there's a lot of resilience built into all of the different storage layers. Because it's a best practice, we are taking regular backups. We have a disaster recovery plan in place. All of those things are set up. It would take a monumental failure to actually need to fall all the way back to a backup that we were taking and restore from that. But we're still taking them just in case. There's always that chance that it could happen. But again, really the amount of redundancy at every layer in the system really is protecting us from those data failures. And if you really want something like physical location data center to data center failover, that's something that we're happy to talk about as well. You can probably guess it's not very cheap to do, but we do already have a solution in place. And then finally, monitoring is the last piece of this. In order to maintain a high performance environment, you really need to be monitoring what's happening in the system. Otherwise, you're going to be reactive. You have to wait for something to fail, try to figure out what failed, try to figure out what you should do to fix it, and then try to make that change and bring everything back up. With monitoring, you can proactively keep an eye on all of the different system metrics and determine when things are getting out of your comfortable range, so you can go and correct that problem before it actually causes a system failure. Now, hopefully, this is all none of this is news to you, and these are all things that you know and you're already doing. But just from what we see, that is not the case. So at the very least, people are not monitoring their Atlassian applications to the level that they should be. So a handful of things around that. So we've developed another complementary technology called Moneo. This is actually a tool that we use with our clients to assess their existing infrastructure and determine if it's capable of handling the load that they expect for it, or when they're already in a degraded state, if they're already having performance problems, helps us pinpoint exactly what is the root cause of this problem. Until you can figure out the root cause, you're never going to fix the problem. And there are a lot of red herrings in the Atlassian tools. So there's kind of that nice thing where you get an error message in the Jira log that tells you you can't log into the mailbox, and that's why the mail handler isn't working. Occasionally you get those kinds of errors, but really when it comes to performance issues, you're not really going to get an error message in the Jira log that tells you why you're having a performance issue. So you really need to go a lot deeper. So Moneo is a suite of tools that we have built that help us quickly determine and pinpoint where those problems actually are. So it becomes a very useful thing for assessing a system that's already having problems or one that you expect to scale. Similarly, we're leveraging the same technology from a monitoring perspective within Cumulus. So we can take this Moneo, and use that to monitor all of the key system metrics that we've discovered over the years. So it's obvious things like the actual physical server itself, so CPU, memory, disk space. There are a lot of other metrics like networking traffic, database traffic, latencies in all of those places, as well as looking through the application logs, because there are still really good errors that come out of those logs, and we want to be able to know about those things because they can lead to either the root cause of the performance issue or just other things that need to be fixed. Again, a lot of times when an Atlassian application is really suffering, it's not because of one particular thing. It's because some number of factors are all interacting in an unusual way, and that's really what's causing the system performance degradation. So on top of using our own tool that we have built, we're using a whole suite of monitoring tools. So we're monitoring all these system metrics and more. We have an alerting system built into that. So whenever there is an issue, whenever we run into a warning state or especially a critical state, that reports back to our Jira. Weird, you probably wouldn't have guessed that that's what we're using for incident management. So we get an incident there. We also have monitoring tools that call whoever is on call and have our support engineers jump in and take a look at that as quickly as possible. This is just a little example of some of the output that comes out of Moneo. We take all of this information and we feed it into a report. We either have a senior engineer look at it, or the tools themselves will actually spit out where they think the root causes are. Really, the point of this slide is to show that there's a lot of information that's coming in. There's a lot of different factors that we feed off of in order to look for where those root causes are, both through work that Atlassian has done and work that Principio Consulting has done over the years. We have found what we consider to be the acceptable thresholds for, say, network latency or database transit time, disk access speed. There are certain thresholds that once you get above those thresholds, we know that performance is going to start to suffer. That if disk access to your index is too slow, that's going to cause problems. If memory is swapping, if heap memory is swapping, then we know that's going to cause problems with garbage collection. So by gathering all these details, we can start to focus in on where the core problems are. A little aside, I know this is all about Cumulus, but keep in mind that Moneo and these assessment technologies are very useful in your own organization as well. So if you're hosting the Atlassian applications and you feel like you're not getting the level of performance that you should be getting, please give us a call. Let us come out and do an assessment and help you get that tuned in. because the data center offerings are great, but unless you actually have a healthy system in your single standalone server instance, moving to data center isn't going to fix your problem. It's just going to kind of delay the inevitable of it falling over. So it's really important to get all of those issues fixed before you try to move to data center, whether you're hosting with us or doing it on your own. So this was a pretty quick webinar today. We were trying to keep it short and just introduce this technology to you. So we went over the architecture, why we created it. Really, we think that there's a lot more performance that you can get out of your Atlassian applications, but really it comes down to having the virtual layer and the physical layer underneath that correctly tuned in order to get that high performance. So that's what we built. We're kind of sticklers for security, so we have a pretty tight security model around it to keep your data protected and safe. We have a lot of redundancy built into the system to ensure that any hardware failures don't turn into data losses for you. And then finally, we're monitoring those systems very closely so that we can look for, I didn't talk about intrusion detection, but that's actually part of the monitoring system as well. That really probably falls back up to the security piece. But we're monitoring the systems to proactively prevent issues from happening as opposed to waiting for failures to occur. I didn't really give you a whole lot of time to come up with questions, but if you have any, now would be a good time to ask them.
Great, thanks, Chris. So we do have one question. What is the cost to host with Cumulus? And I can answer that. We have a variety of sizes depending on your needs and the size of your Atlassian installation, as well as your data center needs. You can contact us at sales@percipio.com, and we can get some information from you and give you an exact price.
Thank you, Shayla. Yeah, so as Shayla mentioned, there's a number of different sizes there that's largely going to revolve around the amount of RAM and disk space and processors that are on the servers themselves. Those are some of the key metrics that really determine performance, and depending on how many users you have, how much data you have, how many people are using things concurrently, that helps us size your servers appropriately.
All right, so it looks like that's it for questions. Just a reminder, our next webinar, Running on All Cylinders, Performance Tuning for the Atlassian Toolset, is on May 6th at 11 a.m. Central. We appreciate your time. If you have any outstanding questions, please email us at sales@percipio.com. Have a great day, and thanks a lot.